I
into
don't remember what we were talking about.
staff kids.
Staff kids. So staff kids. So anyway, no, not like Aaron's staff with 2 A's. But yeah, being a staff kid, it actually did have some good sides but it definitely had some bad sides too.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe look at the bad stuff first and then end with the good stuff.
Okay.
So, but also the thing to remember is like not every place is the same.
True.
So I don't think our experience being staff kids is going to
It's the
is the
totality
same
of staff kids.
as
Mhm.
other people. You know, there were some things, and you always have to look at things too. Like if you have a bad experience somewhere, I think it's important to be honest that it was a bad experience. Sometimes people want you to not judge, and so they'll say, "Well, you shouldn't be judging those people."
Judging. That was something I
And-
wanted to talk about at some point.
Well, here
People
we are.
judging you.
Here we
Judging.
are. Well,
Why you always got to be judging?
why are you always judging me? That there's a balance between identifying something that was not a good situation and then being judgmental about it. So sometimes when you've been through a bad experience, you do need to talk about it in a sense to try to process through it. For several reasons. Sometimes some of it is just so you don't turn around and do the
The
things,
exact
Same
same
thing.
thing again.
the same things that you learned
Or
doing to
the-
other people.
Or the things that people did to you to other people.
Yeah, and just being able to move on and
Right.
recognize what things were good, what things were bad. And so sometimes I guess you have to be careful though who you talk about it with, and you have to make sure that when you're talking about it, you truly are processing through it and it's not just a gossip fest,
Let me tell you about this horrible thing.
Yeah. So,
Right.
Tell you a story all about how.
yeah.
This
And the
person
thing-
messed up my
Upside
life real
down.
no.
So,
Right.
and the thing is too is, when we talk about stuff, we're not sitting there saying, well, if I was in charge, it would be like this, because a lot of people when they're, put in different situations, they, looking back, they might look back and go, yeah, if I could do that over again, I wouldn't have made those decisions. So,
Right.
So when we're talking about some of the negative stuff, it's not to make anybody look bad or put people down. It's just saying this was some things that went on and it just wasn't good, wasn't healthy. But you move on from that. So,
Right.
one of the things that was like a negative experience for me was the expectation for the staff was to be available at a phone call, just at a phone call or text.
Drop everything and
Parents had to drop everything and go do something. And when it was something where maybe somebody was in an accident or, somebody needed help with something, that was fine. But when it was something where it was like a meeting about something that wasn't life altering
useful.
and it was like 3 hours long, so you're sitting
3
down,
hour meeting.
you're
a
sitting down to
3
have
hour-
dinner, and all of a sudden there's a phone call and your parents have to leave and they're gone for like 3 hours and they don't get back till like 11:30.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It gets frustrating. I mean, and that was not like a one-time thing. Or sometimes they, never came home from work, until late at night because there was some meeting that
Scheduled
that
afterwards.
lasted forever. And so there was a lot of times where, you were, just hanging out, waiting, for mom and dad to come home. And then just seeing the constant, like, the phone would ring and they're like, oh, where's my phone? I gotta have my phone, or would text, and they're like having to be attached to it because
Right.
if they,
Never know when you might get a call.
you might get a call, and if you didn't answer within a certain time frame, you're in big trouble,
Mm-hmm.
and that was, that was hard to watch, and it was kind of upsetting it was very conflicting because, you look at it from the standpoint of, well, yes, God comes first. So then you're like, oh, well, I need to have a good attitude about this. But, sometimes people can make the mistake of putting God equal with the church, or church equal with God, I should say.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And there's been a lot of people that have mentioned, looking at the Bible, God created the family before he created the church. God created
Right.
Adam and Eve first.
In
and
fact, he created them to be his family.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
created the family was kind of his original idea.
Yeah. So, so since then I've learned that, church does not equal serving God. And so, yes, sometimes, well, oftentimes when you serve God, he's going to have you serve in the church. But if it's stealing all your family time, then you got to look at it again and go, is this really right? And again,
Yeah.
there are times where, God's going to deal with you to take care of something that's going to pull you away from some family time in one situation.
Mm-hmm.
Like I said, if somebody's sick in the hospital and they need somebody to be there with them, well, that's an appropriate time to
Right.
say, hey guys, we're going to put this time together on hold so we can go be with these people when they're in distress,
Right.
But if it's like a constant thing and it's things that really could be taken care of in a different manner. And I have a different perspective too, because I also eventually was on staff. So I was there for some of the meetings and then found out these were,
What happens at
these
these
were the
meetings?
meetings that,
You got to see it from the flip side.
yeah, and see that really there were a lot of them that took away time from people that didn't really need to,
But don't you dare miss it.
Yeah, but everybody had to be there. And a lot of times it would be stuff that didn't apply to them, And so that's where some of that frustration was. And you have to work through it and again say, okay, looking back, you got to have that balance of, making sure that where you're serving, you're following the Lord's leading and not just following the push of, well, I've got to do whatever this person says, I got to serve at the church all the time. Serving
Right.
the church is equal to serving God.
Right.
And no, serving God means at some point you're going to serve the church. It's you got to kind of look at it backwards.
Right. It's like Jesus talked about, and I think may have mentioned it on the podcast before, but talked about the people at the end of time. They're going to say, Lord, Lord, didn't we prophesy in your name? Didn't we cast out devils? Didn't we do all these, great things in your name? He's going to say, away from me, I never knew you, you who work iniquity. Not saying that all the people who are serving the church are that way, but he's saying there are some people that they've dedicated everything to serving the church and they didn't know God. They didn't know
Right.
the Lord. They were serving the church. You have to make sure that not only that there is a difference, but what the difference is between having that relationship with the Lord and serving the church. Because if you serve the church, the whole world might think that you're doing something great because you're serving the church. But if you don't know the Lord, it doesn't make a difference in the end. You've got to have that relationship with God.
Yeah.
And it's not that Jesus didn't want people casting out devils.
Right.
That was something he said to do. But it wasn't about that. It was more so about people who didn't put God first and put all these other things first.
Yeah.
It's kind of interesting. It does kind of remind me a little bit when we first moved down here. Now, things are different now, but there were times when my parents would do things for people, and they would end up staying late, not like a meeting necessarily, but they would, if someone needed this or that, and it's not that God didn't want them helping people, but there were times when it took away family time, and times where it's been like, well, maybe that wasn't the time right then. And
because sometimes it proved out that the person really didn't care about the Lord at all.
Yeah, that was definitely frustrating sometimes. But thankfully, my parents actually, they looked and they said, okay, let's look at this. Let's look, what does God want us to do? Not, who has a need? Because it's easy to look at people who say, well, who has a need, and fill needs. There's a lot of needs in the world, but the question is not, are there needs? You can always find a need. The question is, what needs does God want you to fulfill right then?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Not giving out of compulsion. It's I want to say, I should know this. I think it's 2 Corinthians 9 or am I on the right track?
Something?
I want to say it's 9:7. I have to look at, or 7:9, something like that.
It's 9. I just don't know the verse.
Yes, 9:7. Or let's see. I'm trying to see if I can find the rest of it. 2 Corinthians 9 verse 7. Every man according as he purposeth in his heart, so let him give, not grudgingly or of necessity, for God loves a cheerful giver. In other words, what's in, and it's a little bit different. I said what God, is asking of you, but it's the point of not giving grudgingly or of necessity. In other words, oh, there's such a need for this, because there's such a need. I've got to do this. Well, is that something that you want to do out of the goodness of your heart? Is that something God's placing on your heart? Or is it something that you feel this like nagging from other people, someone trying to convince you this is what you need to do,
Sometimes
and that's where the
people
difference
try
is.
Try to control you and put on their sad face. Oh, poor me, I need this, and they're just trying to mooch off of you.
It kind of gives me the kind of reference to our last week's podcast. We talked about the Gospel Billow Show, and they talked about walking in the real kind of love. And there was this character named T.W. Tutwater, and he was this one character's boss. And he's supposed to be an ungodly person. He finds out that this character went to church, and he heard this sermon about walking in love. He says, "Oh, did you? Well, I'm going to give you an opportunity to practice that." He's like, "Why don't you, feed me my favorite snack? Why don't you shine my boots and work overtime without pay?" And he was doing all these things that were, causing that he was just trying to manipulate him. And he was thinking, oh, out of compulsion, because this is what walking in love is, and it's not that you're not supposed to do things that, are inconvenient sometimes, or even if they're trying to manipulate you, but not because they're trying to manipulate you. Jesus talked about, if they ask you to go 1 mile, go with them 2. Going that extra, the extra mile is probably where that came from. But not letting a person manipulate you, or some people try to say, ooh, you're a Christian, huh? Well, if you're a Christian, then you should be doing this, and this. And it's like, well, not if that's not, you point the context out of if God has told me to do that or not,
Yeah.
looking at it blanketly and trying to pull you to do what they want, not actually what God wants.
Yeah.
So that's kind of a little divulging, I guess, off of staff kids, but it's a valid thing that happens when you're on this. That happens to staff members that, oh, this is something that I've got to do because I'm on staff as on this church. I have to serve the church, and a lot of times as the kids are affected by that, because of what the parents are doing at the church. I remember a lot of times Emily was like our babysitter, or cleaning captain was one of her titles. Whenever we had to clean the house, she was the one in charge. She told us what we had to clean.
Yeah.
So not that that's, I don't know. I always called her bossy, which, not that she is bossy. She just, looking back on it now that I'm a mature adult, I see that I was probably
20-something years, but I finally figured out that I was not
20-something years. How old
bossy.
am I?
It was slightly less than that. Like
Okay.
More like
a decade
15 or
and a half,
16.
15
maybe.
years. Okay.
But yeah.
Yeah. But so, that was one thing, that was hard. I think another thing too is just dealing with the expectations, and there's different things, sometimes feeling like people expected you to be perfect because your parents were on staff. And by perfect, just like not making mistakes, also, being full of faith. I remember, I was kind of just having a hard week, and somebody was like asking me like, "Oh, how are you doing?" And I was like, "I'm making it," which really for me was like as much faith as I could muster. I thought that's a faith statement. Like, I'm going to make it this week, and they kind of looked at me like that was negative. And I thought, oh my goodness, that was all I got.
How dare you not be over the top?
I'm like,
Mm-hmm.
that's what I got this week, but just feeling like, you had to be perfect. And also, for me, and I think I've mentioned this before, but some of it was self-induced, but just feeling like if I made a mistake that was so bad, whatever.
The whole thing's going to come crashing down.
Well, if I make a mistake and then my parents get in trouble, like I could like ruin my parents' life because I made a mistake.
Oh, right.
Just feeling that pressure that because, I'm like, oh, I'm on staff. So, or not I'm on staff, but my parents are on staff. So anything I do is a reflection of the church staff. And so then if I do something wrong and then, so I don't know, it was just a lot of pressure. I just remember feeling a lot of pressure with that to just, be perfect.
Yeah. So for me, I kind of, like I said, I wore kind of like a badge of like courage of honor. Like I thought it was like top stuff because my kids here, because I was a kid of, someone on staff, because, knowing sometimes like what was going to be the children's curriculum or whatnot, one time I was able to, the teacher one time didn't know where the communion verse was. And because my parents were on staff, I was able to take a guess at it. And they're like, "Oh, how'd you know that?" I'm like, ha 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 ha, So I kind of I had to take a readjustment period from that, realizing that I wasn't all of that, even though I thought it was at the time, But,
Yeah.
So,
I don't know, for me, the hardest part was we had to be there like an hour early or something like that. And like, so we were there at like 7. No, not 7.
Well,
We were there.
depended on what day.
yeah.
They had a couple of different.
Well, 7:30.
Services.
You had to be there an hour and a half,
Hour,
I think,
yeah.
before
Okay.
service started.
So like 7:30.
In the morning?
So we had to like
Yeah,
leave probably
service
by like
started at
7.
9.
We had to leave by like 7.
Because
And so that was kind of hard.
at one point we lived like
Well,
half an hour away in like
yeah.
not mountainous terrain, more like hills and curves, which is
Mhm.
bad for me if I didn't eat enough in the morning. That proved to be a problem on a regular basis.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it was
Well, and it
interesting
was 2
'cause-
services too. That was
Right.
the thing. And services were like 2 hours, 2.5 hours long.
Well, the first one was only like an hour or something.
It got cut short because
Hour and a half.
it had to be done in enough time for the
For the
second
11
The
service to
second
start.
one was longer, and your parents are on staff, so you have to be there for both services.
Right.
So
So you're there
you're
for
like
the
the
hour
first
and a
one
half
there
early.
and the last one to leave, and you're like there for like 5 hours probably.
yeah,
something
you're
like
there
that, yeah.
from like 7:30, 8
least.
o'clock until at least 1 o'clock, sometimes 2.
It's kind of interesting because you're usually one of the first people in kids class, but
Right.
otherwise
Also
As
the
soon as
last
the
person.
you're
as the
also
teachers
the
are
last
there,
to leave.
yeah. As
Like-
soon as the teachers are there to take kids in before it starts, you're there because your parents have things to do to help the service run, and so
Yeah. Like sometimes there will be like, oh, who else is left in class? Oh, it's all of the staff kids who their parents couldn't pick
Yeah.
them up yet.
right.
Or sometimes you had like parents who were in other classes. So sometimes
Right,
like
like-
teachers had to be like, okay, well, we're going to trade kids. I'll get my kids from your class and I'll bring your kids from my class.
Yeah. So it's the thing sometimes where it's like it was okay if your parents were teaching the class you were in because you were the last ones there, but you weren't holding anyone. But if someone else was teaching, which kind of made me think of like another, common thought that I'm sure a lot of, staff kids and anyone in ministry, of like wondering what it's like to, because you are there so early and you are there from before everything starts and after everything's done, which became kind of a staple. I think I'm kind of used to that standpoint of being there when everything starts and wait till everything's done. But, the question of sometimes you go, I wonder what it's like to, it's the thing of like where you put so much into it where you need to be like, need to put something in to fill yourself up because you kind of wonder what it's like from the different perspective of just, getting in and walking into it and enjoy the service, it's it's an odd thing for me because I'm not as used to walking in and enjoying it, and enjoying is not the right term, but, receiving, we talked about that, I think, one of the earlier podcasts of you actually need to not be so distracted by what you're doing to serve that you need to receive, but that's definitely a struggle of like, wondering what it's like.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now, I think on a positive side of being a staff kid, I think it makes you really appreciate what it takes to run a church. Especially a larger church. It takes a lot of different people doing different things, and so you kind of get that inside view into things, and just seeing all the hard work that people put in to help keep a church running from.
Because we had like
things.
a bunch of staff and several volunteers that
Lots
helped.
of volunteers, yeah.
Tons and tons of volunteers every week,
Right.
helping out with stuff.
Yeah.
Which I think came a blur for me as a kid, it being the age that I was, not understanding the difference between a staff kid and a volunteer kid. I think they kind of meshed.
They start to blend.
They start to blesh when you know them well enough because, they experience a lot of the same things actually that a staff kid would because, if they're a volunteers kid and they're running the front desk or they're teaching a kid's class, well, they have the same thing of as soon as they can, they're in the class because their parents are teaching the other kids class, so they need to be in kids class as soon as possible, so they experience some of those same things. Even if their parents are on staff, they may not be getting paid to do it, but they're experiencing the same issue because their parents are also giving their time.
Yeah. And I think another thing too is especially like as a teenager, when you're at the age where you can start kind of getting involved in volunteering, had a lot more opportunities just because I was there all the time. My parents were always there, so I could volunteer every weekend.
Like you didn't have to wait till you could drive to show up.
Right.
You always.
My parents were always going to be there early, so it wasn't a matter of I can't get to church on time or whatever. I was always there, so I had opportunities to, volunteer in the praise and worship team and the children's. The children's was my main thing that I volunteered in, but
I volunteered in the children's praise and worship. I don't think I did any of the actual classes. I don't think.
But so that's also something you're there, so you also kind of get the inside scoop of cool events that are coming. So when things are happening, so that's fun. And again, like I said, when there's big events like that, you're able to volunteer because your parents are there. And you do form a bond with, some of the other staff kids or volunteer kids, the ones that are there all the time, especially, for a while, they kind of let up on it later, but it used to be, everyone had to wait to leave until the pastors left. And so, but sometimes if they would meet with somebody after service, you would be there waiting a long, long time. So while you're waiting, you kind of get together with the other staff kids and you're all just hanging out waiting for the clear that,
Play Ninja.
everyone can
Oh yeah, Ninja.
leave.
It was always a fun game, but it's a really intense. It's a pretty rough game.
I don't like that game.
I don't know.
Yeah,
I always
it
liked
makes no
it for
sense
whatever
to me.
reason.
And I feel like every time I play, the rules are different. People
That and
change.
Foursquare.
It's like it's an evolving game.
No, you didn't.
like,
you didn't.
No,
I
you didn't do this. Well, no, you flinched after. And I'm like, it's like Mother May I, where it's, what is the point of this
Yeah.
I don't know.
game?
I must have played with really good people where that wasn't as big of a deal. But
There was all kinds of. There was one that didn't last very long because it just all it did was inflict pain. It was like Foot Ninja, where instead of trying to slap their hand, you tried to
yeah.
stomp on their foot.
That-
Yeah. I mean, it sounds funny until you play it. I guess I don't know. It's especially if someone's not wearing the right kind of shoes. You're like, I can't play it because I'm not. I'm wearing open-toed shoes. Like, oh well, sorry.
Yikes.
Like. But that one, I only remember doing it once or twice. I don't remember it being a regular thing.
yeah, I think that was on like a few times.
See, the game that I like that they probably can't ever bring back is Red Rover.
Red Rover.
Yeah,
I feel like kids today, like even back when I was a kid, even
Well, there's a
some
high risk
people
of
would like run fast, but like some like kid like the Foot Ninja is a perfect example of like, oh, let's take this game and make it painful. So like that seems to be a
kids running into each other. What could possibly go wrong?
So I feel like if that was a popular game today, like there would be many more broken arms and it just wouldn't go well. But
Yeah.
it was, I
game-
remember playing that growing up and it was a lot of fun. I love that game.
A game that I kind of remember people would play. I don't think I played it a lot, and I was never really good at it. Hacky Sack.
Yeah, I remember
no.
that. I don't think I was ever good at it either. I never had my own, but
No.
There were people who could like keep going forever and ever and ever. But
I mean, not literally, because otherwise the game would still be
Oh,
going.
okay.
But
No,
Okay.
there's one person they're still playing right now.
it's
They've
on
been
live
playing
stream.
They've been playing for 25 years. Still going.
Live stream on the Guinness Book of World Records .com.
Yeah.
Totally kidding.
They have one of those backpacks that they fill with a
with the
protein
water, right?
shake. So they still get.
they're still in the
They're
same
just
outfit from 15, 20 years ago.
They're just still going. No, that game again did not make sense to me. I'm like, how do you win? You're like, well, you don't win. You just like,
You
I
lose.
guess
You
you get the
lose.
most.
Not
If
lose.
you like keep it going for the most times in a row, I guess you kind of win. But I don't know.
You win by being the last
I
person.
It
always thought it was
wasn't
the last person
competitive enough
standing.
for me.
Well, I thought there was
Yeah.
like a weird variation where they would like send the hacky sack around
Right.
to like the next person.
Mm.
It's like a circle or something like that where
Yeah.
they're passing it to each other. It's like hot potato, but they're kicking it, and it's a corn sack.
Well, no, you
Mm.
try to not break the streak, so you have to be like the last person
Oh,
to not break the streak.
yeah.
Mm.
It required too much athletic ability, which those who know me know it's not that I don't have any. I don't have much of it. No, without some more practice. So, but another one I really liked was Statue. That was a fun Sunday school game. No one else
I
remember that
know.
one?
I don't know. I found that one really hard.
It was a ploy by Sunday school teachers to
Yeah,
find ways to keep
wasn't
their
it-
kids still. It was you'd say 1, 2, 3 statue, and you have to freeze, and if you moved, you're out. I think that was like a
Yeah.
way of like all these kids are getting rowdy, so let's play a statue. Let's get them to be quiet and still. But,
It's like
which is
what you
very
use
smart,
once
but-
they're old enough to catch on about the quiet game, which they usually catch on to
Yeah.
that by about 4.
because it requires some
They're
skill.
like, nah, it's not worth it.
We're not trying to blow the lid off of
not
all
really
the
fun
Sunday school
anymore.
teachers that have
Yeah.
used this, but
Kids,
It
don't
does work.
listen to what we're saying. The quiet game and statue are fun games.
oh, I like statue. I just you know.
Not your teachers just trying to get you to be quiet.
The key to winning statue is start with your eyes closed. Otherwise, you're gonna get in trouble because as soon as you blink, you're out.
Thumbs up 7-Up. That one was a good
Oh.
quiet.
I
It was a
actually
good
kinda
game to
remember
get
that one.
kids
That
to
was
be
nice.
quiet,
That was
but they
It was actually
didn't know that's
entertaining.
what you're doing. Like that one, they wouldn't even figure it out.
That one
Like,
was
did you
actually
know that?
entertaining.
Did you know that? That's why we would play that game.
looking
Not-
back
not
on it, it makes
completely.
sense, but I don't think I understood it at the time. No.
Yeah.
It was kind of an entertaining game though, except for the fact that you have those people who would always pick each other,
Yeah.
and you always knew. So like the same 7 people are up there, but otherwise it's fun.
Yeah.
It's been so long since I played it. I really actually don't remember generally how it works, but
I don't
that's
know.
okay.
Everyone puts
You,
their
Everyone-
you
head
close your
down
eyes and put your thumb
put their
up, and
thumbs
someone
up.
would touch
Yeah,
it. But I don't
so
remember.
then there's like 7 people, and they go around the room and like touch your thumb, and then if your thumb was touched during the thing, you get to go up and you get to guess who of those 7 people touched your thumb,
Gotcha.
Mhm.
Okay.
and then if you guess them, then you have to, or then you get to go and be the person who puts everyone else's thumbs down.
Gotcha. Okay.
And so if you're the person up there, you try to pick people who won't guess you.
Like people you don't know or something
Yeah.
like that. You know.
People you don't know. Doing girls is nice because at that age, girls usually pick girls and guys usually pick guys. And so if you're
they
a
would be
guy and you
confused
pick
if
a
you-
girl,
Gotcha.
they
and
have no idea.
Unless you like cram the thumb down, and then they figure that
Well,
it has
yeah,
to be a
that-
guy
that-
because it hurt.
But if you're
Yeah.
nice to them,
Mhm.
they'll never
So,
guess.
so you
No.
were one to employ strategy. I see.
You know what
I
I,
did that like
realized?
once, I think.
That's not a good social distancing game.
that it is not.
Touching.
None of these are actually.
None of them are.
Ninja.
Duck, duck,
Hacky
goose.
sack.
Hacky sack, kind of, because you're not
Except
actually
everyone's
touching it.
Well, you're touching it with
Just
your,
with your foot.
though.
Mother May I. That's about the closest you can get to social distancing.
Simon says.
Yeah.
Simon says.
That's a good
Yeah.
social distancing game.
Hopscotch. No,
Does
then
anyone really
everyone's
play, does
touching
anyone
the,
play that
the
anymore? Yeah, they don't.
stone.
They touch the stone anyway.
Everyone touches the stone. Maybe not.
Hot potato is definitely horrible.
Oh no. Yeah. Quiet game though. That
Yeah,
one
there
works.
we go.
There we go.
Uh-huh.
Quiet
Statue.
and statue. Okay, those
Social
are good.
distancing game. Just saying.
See, there you go. There you go. Sunday school teachers, if you're still meeting, you can
Social distance with
use this.
statue in the quiet game.
And Simon
Ta-da.
says,
And Simon
And
says.
Simon says.
let's see. I don't know. I'm trying to think any other good social distancing games.
I don't know. Kickball? No.
You know, I'm thinking of a
Foursquare's
game.
not.
This was at a different church, but I'm like, no one would. There's a lot of games. I had the privilege of growing up in the 90s, so there were a lot of like Sunday school games in the 90s that would
Hey.
not be used now. One of them being Chubby Bunny.
Yes.
So if you're unfamiliar with that one, it's where you stuff as many marshmallows into your mouth as possible and still are able to say Chubby Bunny.
Looking back, it probably wasn't a good
Unfortunately, and
game.
I think somebody choked. I don't know if they died but definitely somebody.
Really quick.
Point is,
No, but
choking
they
hazard.
definitely they majorly
it's-
choked on it. So it's really not a good game to do.
We do not recommend Chubby Bunny.
No.
Bobbing apples, was that the name of it?
Uh,
That one's probably not good for
Yeah.
social
Oh,
distance.
my
that's
goodness.
not good in a
Ew.
healthy season.
When there's not a pandemic, I won't play that game. It's nasty. But actually, what they did at this other church is they did bobbing for spam. They had a big tub of milk and they put spam and they had to bob for
Oh, that is
spam.
so nasty.
The other one
That's
they
awful.
did. This one I was like, I remembered. It was a game that was called Adam and Eve Race, and they would have a guy and a girl each bite on one side of the apple, and they'd have to race to the back of the room and race back.
I do believe
Also,
that's
not
not
social,
quite
good for
And
social distancing.
no.
quite how that story. It's how the story went, but it's
I remember
right-
because I was like raising my hand to play the game, and I didn't get picked, and I was like, oh okay, and then I saw what it was. I was like, gross. I'm like, nope.
because the point
I
was
know a
they
game.
bit into the apple and bad things happened. So anyway,
Yeah.
I know of a good game. The game with the egg and the spoon, where you go back and forth. That
It's not a good social distancing game.
well,
They all got to touch the spoons.
I guess
unless you have your own spoon.
Oh, a disposable
get a disposable spoon.
There you go. Okay.
For some reason, that's what I pictured.
And you
I
don't have to
didn't realize
touch
there was
the
another
egg.
spoon.
But they have to get within 6 feet of each other.
And then you can't give the person a high five at the end,
No.
No,
Air hugs for everyone.
there you go. All right. Well,
Anyway. Saturday.
Well, I'm not really sure how much time we.
Simon says we're out of time.
Simon says, wrap it up.
But anyway,
So anyways,
Close out with a word of prayer. See you all. I always say see you all next time. I hope no one's actually as audited out by the fact that I say that as I sometimes get, but no,
yeah.
just me.
I'm not audited out by it, but
Cool.
Audited.
audited out.
Don't question the king's grammar. Not that I'm a king, but there's a VeggieTales reference for anyone who caught that. But anyway, okay. We can close out with a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, I come to you in the name of Jesus, and I thank you that we gave us this good podcast today. I pray for all of our listeners that you would protect them and keep them safe, Lord, during this this time, that you would use this time that they'd be able to grow closer with you, Lord, and just to get to know you better, and that they would be totally safe and until we come again and far beyond, Lord. And I thank you for that. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Amen.
All right. Well, if you want, you can leave us comments. If you have a question for us that you'd like us to answer, or you can, if you want us to answer on the podcast, I should say.
On YouTube and Facebook and
you can comment on iHeartRadio. I found out.
Yes.
No one's done it yet, but you can if you want to. Or you can email us at 3 PKS@iabound.org. That's IABOUND, right? Yeah. .org. Excuse me. And you can email us your questions if you want us to answer them.
I think there should be a W in there. Hashtag honkies.
In case it gets edited out, that's a reference to an earlier part of the conversation. The pre-show. The pre-podcast.
The pre-PK podcast.
Anyway.
Like a tongue twister.
Pre-K. Pre-K is on a podcast.
Pre-K is on podcast.
That's kindergarten. Or no, preschool.
It's
That's preschool.
Pre-kindergarten.
Pre-kindergarten.
Preschool.
Hence pre-K.
Anyway.
And
you can also listen to us on YouTube, Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, TuneIn.
And we link to it on Facebook.
And we link to
it's
it on
not
Facebook.
Directly on
Did
Facebook.
Did I miss anyone? I don't think I
Not
missed
that I
anyone.
know of.
Anyway. And you can listen to us there, or you can tell your friends.
Or you
And
can
they can
listen
listen
to
to
us
us
right
there.
where you're listening to us now.
Yeah.
There you go.
If you're listening to this, you've probably found somewhere you can listen to us. So
You found somewhere you can listen to. If you found your favorite platform, we don't know, but it's okay.
all right. And with that,
Simon says, see you next time.
Stay hockey.